have to share about their evaluation and what they've found interesting, challenging, what else they would like to know. We can just go ahead and get started. Emma, do you want to advance to the next slide?
Yeah.
So just oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it, but you can.
No, go ahead, Emma.
So my fault, I accidentally put in the wrong date for the webinar in the last email that I sent out. It's actually going to be May 26th. We're going to have Savita Custa joining us. She works for the Cambridge Science Festival in England, and she's going to be speaking with us about European evaluation techniques. So hopefully we can learn something interesting from her. And I'm really excited to have her join us. We've been trying to get her to speak with us for about a year now, and just finally set into her schedule. So please join us for that, and change anything on your calendar. Our next webinar will be May 26th.
Great, thank you. So now we can move on to hearing about from each festival. And before you launch into on your evaluation, if you can just tell everyone who you are, who's speaking, and give us a brief overview of your festival. Some of us may know it well, but some of us may not. So it can be pretty short, just how many days, how many people attend, and any other information that you think might be interesting or relevant to the group. So we can get started. First up is, I believe, Arkansas.
All right, I just unmuted you, Amy. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi, I'm Amy Pierce. I am the director of the Arkansas Science Festival. 2016 will be the third year of our festival. We began in 2014. It is hosted annually in October, and we run about a week of events. Now, that was not what we initially planned, but that's what it morphed into. It started really the concept was we would just have our festival over a weekend, and it would consist of a big performance at one of our performing arts centers on campus, and then an expo. But then other people in the community became really interested in joining us, and so it has been extended, and I think a week is probably what we're going to stick with as a model until that no longer works. We have had about 1,000 or so attendees in the first year. I think that might be a little bit low. It might have been closer to 1,500 or 2,000. And then the second year, we doubled that. So we have seen growth, in the 2 years that the festival has been hosted. We are mainly hosting our events on a university campus. So Arkansas State is in the northeast corner of Arkansas. We are considered to be in the Delta region, and we are in the city of Jonesboro, which is the hub for this part of the state. So we are the largest county, the largest city. We have a lot of industry. We serve people that live in the Boot Hill of Missouri, and also parts of western Tennessee and northwest Mississippi. So I don't know if anybody can see from the slide here, but I'm using reflections here. And you'll see that kind of throughout the photos, because I feel like in preparing this report I was reflecting really on our last 2 years. And in order for me to really see how EvalFest has impacted us, or our participation has impacted the festival, I really had to compare what happened in 2014 and what we were doing there before we joined EvalFest, to what happened once we joined EvalFest in 2015 and used the evaluation surveys and all of that that other year. Okay, so I guess next slide. So our biggest evaluation success, and so you're going to, again, hear some contrast from 2014 and 2015. So the iPads and using them really did entice survey completion for us. In 2014, we were using paper and pencil, and we only had surveys at one of our events, and it was the main event, which was our expo. And we found that in 2014, that first year, we felt a little bit immobile because we had to set up, a station and try to get attendees to come over to the station, to complete surveys by paper and pencil. We didn't have really the way that our venue was set up. Our volunteers who were helping with evaluation that first year, they couldn't really move freely in and out of the expo and catch people, who had been at the expo for varying lengths of time. We were really standing at a door, an exit, where people who had been part of the expo or who had attended it, they were leaving the expo, and we were trying to get, their thoughts then. So being able to use the iPads and just move, among the attendees, that really facilitated, again, our ability to evaluate. It also helped whenever we moved out of, a facility that was covered, that was indoors. We had some events that were in the form of mini expos at farmers markets, for example, and a tailgate tent. And so the use of the iPads really did assist us, with the evaluation process. So we think that our volunteers, found them relatively, easy to use, and so that is something, again, that we are happy to continue, is just the data collection through the iPads. Okay, next slide. Now, we did have some challenges. Though the iPads were great, in using them at our different venues, one of the events that we offered, and according to the numbers, it's an enormous success. I mean, the first year we had, I think, over 250, 300 at our science tailgate tent, and then this past year in 2015 we had well over 600 attendees at the tailgate tent. For those of you who aren't familiar with tailgating, I mean, I'm assuming everyone is, what we did at our science tailgate tent is we had a tent that preceded our homecoming football game. So we're part of the university, we have a big football program, and so we set up a science tent so that people who were tailgating could come by and have some exposure, some hands-on experience, with science activities. Now, what we learned in doing this 2 years in a row is that people don't attend tailgate tents for science. So they attend to, play bago, to drink beer, to support the athletes and the cheerleaders. And so we had a lot of people filter through our tent, and you'll see the Burmese python there that, some young people, are interacting with, and it was a huge draw. But the people that were interacting, with the Burmese python, they were not inclined to complete a survey on, their experiences with the tailgate tent. So our numbers there were much lower for evaluation than, again, the actual attendance numbers suggest. So this was something that came up, I think, in a conversation we had with Science Festival Alliance. There are just some events that don't lend themselves, very well to evaluation. And so that is, unfortunately, or fortunately, what we learned, again, with our tailgate tent. And then this other comment here that you see with the survey for minors, really for some specifics about that, we would need to consult with our evaluator on the project, and that is Karen Yanowitz. But some of the comments, I mean, she and I have had a discussion, and she felt that some of the, I guess, questions or the approach, with the surveys was a little confusing for young people, because in my recollection, maybe the parent answered the first few questions, and then the iPad was handed over, if there was a child that was present, and the child addressed, answered a few questions and then had to return it to the parent. And so I think in some cases that did not work very well. There was some misunderstanding about who was to complete what and how to complete it. And so maybe this is something that, we can discuss on, how to improve, that experience for this coming year. So one of Karen's recommendations might be to have a completely separate survey for the youngest ones, like 10 and under, and then maybe even another one for ages. She had said 11 to 16, but maybe even 17, because, when you think about where the minor age cutoff is, that's, at 17. So that's something that we hope to consider a little bit more whenever we see everybody in June, just to get some feedback on that, what other people are doing, and how, again, we might benefit, from other people's suggestions. Okay, next slide. So what did we learn? So there are a couple of, I guess, statements here that you see, and you'll see differences between 2014 and 2015, where some of the same, types of questions or same type of data were collected. Now, some of our surveys were revised, between 2014 and 2015, so maybe questions were worded a little bit differently, or we couldn't necessarily group, or compare, data together. So that's why some of the bars are just single bars. One of the things that you see at the top is the diversity of attendees. So we were pleased to see such an increase in diversity from one year to the next. So I think in 2014 we had about 3% of diversity, so that's like kind of non-Caucasian, Black, or African American. And then in 2015, that increased to 12%. So that was something that we thought was great, because we really were trying to reach out to the community and try to get some of the diversity reflected in the community also reflected in our science events. Also, another thing that we noticed that was happening was that we had a lot of adults that were attending our events without children. So these were adults that were coming, but they were not bringing the family. And the thing that was curious, about this result is that most were geared towards family. So we did not have any adults-only events. We had expos and mini expos. We had, again, performances at the Performing Arts Center. And most of these were, for people of all ages, but not specifically geared towards adults. And so one of the things that, again, we're looking at is maybe we need to have some events incorporated into our program that are more focused, for adults. Maybe, again, their attendance at these events in 2014 suggests that they are seeking, these types of experiences. And then the adults who did come, they stated that they did participate in hands-on activities. So what you'll see in another slide is we don't really know which activities they were participating in, so we don't know which ones are the biggest draw to them, and that would be important to know so that we could design, again, some experiences that are focused, on that particular group. We had the majority of people agreeing that they learned something new and that they were more interested in STEM. So why we didn't ask, that same question about being interested in STEM in 2015, I don't know. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was asked or just we didn't consider it. Okay, so next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is how we used or are using our results. One of the things that we did from our findings in 2014 is we actually presented them at the Association for Psychological Science. And so on the right side of the slide, you see our poster that we presented. We were also fortunate to be able to develop an article that was then published in Censor, and Censor is a journal, that is focused on science, civic engagement. And then, for the first time this year, because of, again, what we had learned in 2014 and 2015, we're actually going to offer internships with the Science Festival. And so I've had a lot of interest. If you see at the bottom part of the slide, it said we have 1 to 2 unpaid part-time internship positions available, and I have had tremendous interest in this, and I may have to increase the number or figure something out. So I would be interested in talking to any of you who have offered internships and just get some feedback on how you place people, how you track their time and give them, if you give them course credit, a volunteer certificate, that kind of thing. Those are the things that we have in mind. And our idea is that, again, these interns will work, on the festival side to strengthen evaluation and research efforts. Again, and also contribute to maybe some program design, such as those adult nights, and also help us with our publicity. In addition to that, based on the results that I shared in the previous slide, we're going to continue our efforts to appeal to children, and also we're going to attempt to attract, a more diverse population. Next slide, please. So this is what we still want to know. Again, I think because of some of the maybe design or just implementation issues with the surveys for the children, we're having some difficulty interpreting that data, and so we may want to consider more directed questions for either the younger age group and or, again, the next older age group of kids from 11 to 17. Once again, it'd be interesting to know what the parents are doing. We know that they are participating, but again, which of the events or activities that we're offering are the biggest draw, and then can we do something to capitalize, on that. And one of the things here, I think this was part of this survey, was have you attended, an Arkansas Science Festival event before? And we're just not sure if people, in answering that question, actually remembered or knew that some of the events that we offered were actually part of the Science Festival. So we don't have a lot of, I guess, faith, in the responses to that question, because our festival is a week-long festival, and we have events that are offered at the public library, some, again, that are offered at the Performing Arts Center, some that are at the university, some that are at the museum. So with the attendees, they may not really know or pay attention, to the fact that all of those events that are offered in the various locations fall under the larger umbrella of the Arkansas Science Festival. I mean, despite the fact that we have posters and flyers and people wearing our Science Festival shirts, some people really just still don't realize, that the event is being sponsored by the Science Festival. So that's kind of what we would still like to know and where we are headed, but we're certainly looking forward to another successful year here in Arkansas. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy. I think in the interest of time, we'll hold questions for now. I want to make sure that every festival has the opportunity to share, and so we'll move on to my festival, the Bay Area Science Festival. And Kishore, unfortunately, was not able to join us. As many of you likely know, Kishore Hari is the Bay Area Science Festival director. I'm one of the co-founders of the Bay Area Science Festival, and I'm excited to share a little bit about our evaluation. So, sorry, first just a little bit of context about the Science Festival. We just finished our 5th year, so this 2016 will be our 6th Science Festival. Most years our festival runs about 10 days and reaches this past year 80,000 attendees. We have a series of events for adults. Most of those are in the evenings during the week, and then on the weekends we have a lot of events geared towards families. We culminate with a big expo at AT&T Park, which is where the Giants play baseball here in San Francisco. So I'll leave that, and we can move on to the next slide, Emma. So what we wanted to share in terms of our evaluation successes is how useful zip code data has been to us. And what you see here is a map of the Greater Bay Area, and you see circles representing zip codes from people attending our events. These are, we had about, this is from over 1,000 surveys collected at 3 different expo events. We had an expo event in Santa Rosa, one in Fremont, and then the finale in San Francisco at AT&T Park. And so you can see that the zip code data really mirrors where those events were held, which is what we would expect, and also that we are drawing people from all around the Bay Area, which is what we hope to see. And this information is very useful to us, and it's also useful to our funders. They want to understand our impact, our geographic impact, and therefore their geographic impact with the support that we're offering. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is that same information but zoomed in on San Francisco. And someone, Emma, can you mute others, please?
Sorry about that.
Thank you. So this one is zoomed in on San Francisco, and you can see there where AT&T Park is. And this slide shows, so this is just tied to the data tied to the San Francisco event. And what we use for this, this is actually a web interface where the zip codes were linked with census data, census data and therefore income levels. And we weren't able to show that here with the static slide. But what we're showing here is the percentage of attendees from the different neighborhoods in San Francisco, and showing that we're drawing from all around the city. The areas where there are few, where it's that pale yellow color, those are actually mostly parks in our city. So you wouldn't expect to draw a lot of people from those neighborhoods. And if anyone is interested, we use a tool called CartoDB to map this, and it's a free tool that you can get online. One of our biggest challenges, and I don't have a slide set up for this, but it's just been this gathering enough data. We would always just like to gather more and more surveys, and we actually found that with the iPads, things were slowed down some this year as compared to previous years. The other thing that we have found as a challenge is surveying events outside of the expos. I feel like we've gained a lot of experience and knowledge about how to work successfully at the expos to gather data and how to use volunteers at those events to gather data, but we haven't made the same kind of inroads in events outside of the expo events. So the next question was the coolest things we've learned, and one of the things that we found interesting in our data is when we ask people how they heard about the festival. Every year for now, we have heard that more people hear about it from their children's schools than from any other source. And so this year we decided to probe that a little more deeply, and we wanted to find out which schools attendees' children attended. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is that data. This is showing over 600 distinct schools that children whose families attended the festival attended. And if we go to the next one, Emma, thank you. This is the same thing, but looking solely at the city of San Francisco. And So what we wanted to do and what we're using this data for is to just better understand the messaging and which schools we're able to reach and get out the information and get them to our events. Evaluate where there might be holes, where there are gaps, then we can then target those schools. And also, this is something we were pleased to see here, as you can see on this picture, is that the people came from schools all across the city of San Francisco. And we're just pleased to see that, because the schools in San Francisco obviously represent a real diversity, with certain parts of the city having higher performing schools and other parts of the city having lower performing schools. And we see that people really attended from everywhere within San Francisco. The one kind of not too surprising thing that we found from this data is that it didn't really tell us much more than the zip code data. The school information correlated very closely with the zip code maps. So how do we use our evaluation results? I think in ways similar to most of you. We share the evaluation results with our sponsors, with our partners, advertisers, and helps us think about how to message the Science Festival. And then of course we use the information to improve the festival and improve experiences at festival events. There's a lot that we still want to know and learn about the festival. Some of the things that Kishore and I have been talking about most recently are is better understanding of what's going on at the expo events in the booths. And so some of this could be the observational protocols that we've been talking about, but also I'm really interested in better capturing the conversations that are happening at these booths. These conversations between the kids and the STEM presenters, as well as conversations between adults or parents and the STEM presenters, and so forth. And another thing that is really something we'd like to know a lot more about and is untapped is what is happening at the adult events and what is the impact at our adult-only events. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, and we'll move on to our next festival. All right, St. Petersburg.
So our next festival is St. Petersburg, and Karen, I have you. Right? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm Karen Brownsberger. I'm the chair of the evaluation committee. I'm also faculty at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. And last year, our science festival is always in October. Last year was our 5th year. And of course, the first time that we used the iPads. Our event last year pulled a total of about 20,000 visitors. It is a one-day event, which we have a Friday event, but that is only for teachers who bring their school classes, and that is not open to the public. But the Saturday event itself pulled about 20,000 people. It coincides with Marine Quest, which is on the same day and is staged by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, which is located on our campus. So the festival takes place on our campus, which is a very beautiful environment. Sorry I didn't put any pictures on there, but I've been so busy, it's been so crazy the end of the semester. But we're a beautiful waterfront campus, which in itself pulls a lot of people. We had about 58 exhibitors that put together about 158 exhibits, most of which are hands-on. So people get a chance to play and try out things. And if we could get on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what was our biggest evaluation successes? The number of completed surveys in comparison to prior years. For us, the iPads really worked well because in prior years we had tried to tap into our Wi-Fi and do the surveys on SurveyMonkey, but when you have 20,000 people coming, and everybody wants to be on their cell phone. The last 2 years, the prior years, we tried the Wi-Fi. It didn't work, so we had to resort to paper and pencil, which really slowed down the data collection effort, and we had a lot of incompletes that we had to throw out. So this year, it was really, really great. And also, most of our evaluators are students from USF St. Pete. And for them, it's just a lot more fun going out there and using iPads. So the level of enthusiasm for collecting data clearly improved in comparison to prior years. Okay, so if you could please go on to the next slide. What were the biggest challenges to evaluation? Well, that didn't have anything to do with you guys, but since we were using iPads, we really want to make sure that all of our evaluators knew how to use the questionnaire, how to survey, how to use the iPad to do that. And getting students to commit about an hour of their time in advance of the festival to do this is really, really challenging for us. So we worked with instructors, bribing them with extra credit, and had some pretty good success with that. But the most reliable of the evaluators in terms of coming to the training are actually more mature members of the St. Petersburg community. I think one of our challenges is that we have to resort to volunteer. On one hand, it's really, really cool because it's a completely volunteer-driven event. I mean, everybody is a volunteer, starting with the people who founded this festival and are still leading our steering committee, to the people who are running all the other committees, to the people who are doing the actual physical work. So we had, I think, over 258 volunteers who were involved in putting this together. Another challenge was question 1 layout led to data entry error. So even so, the first question that asked, which science festival are you attending today? And our own evaluators were supposed to answer that question. Some of them, in their haste, pushed the other button, the one that is behind us, underneath us, I think was the Atlanta Festival. So we actually had a bunch of people who allegedly were at the wrong festival. Normally that wouldn't pose a problem, but since some of the questions that we chose to put in our survey were different from what that festival put on their survey, it was really hard to match that up. I finally just decided to throw them out. And then what Arkansas was saying, I didn't put it on my slide, but when she was talking about it, it was true. What are we doing with the people who are not less than 10 years old, but they're also not adults? We had some questions here as to the demographics in terms of spending. So who's spending at the festival are we assessing here? So if we're having a 15-year-old, are we talking about the 15 years old pocket money, or are we talking about the parents spending? So that is really something that I wish we would resolve. And there was also another one. The survey was programmed, if the 5th person that the evaluator approached happened to be a child, we would start with a child survey, and then the child would hand over the iPad to the adult. Well, that means for those cases, we didn't have some of the demographic information up front, like the age, because that was as a screening question, and that was not tied into the adult who took over from the child. So next slide, please. So what is the coolest thing you learned from the evaluation? Well, we've never interviewed children before, so hearing directly from them was really, really cool. So, because I mean, we are trying to create excitement at that age group, in that age group for STEM, so having them tell us what their thoughts were and how much they learned and how much fun it was, that was really cool. Next slide, please. So how to use your evaluation results. The first thing I did after we came out of the festival is I used that one-page brochure that you introduced us to, and I summarized all the most important information. And here I have to say, In addition to the attendee survey, we also do a volunteer survey and we do an exhibitor survey. And I basically, on that one-page brochure, summarized the highlights for each of these three groups. And we had a steering committee meeting today, and I asked them, has this been helpful? And everybody just absolutely loved that one-pager. And of course, we're using this to communicate with sponsors and increase the level of sponsorship. And the chair of our commission committee learned about attendee spending. That should be patterns. I do apologize for that. And that's really important for her to be able to recruit certain types of food vendors because they're interested in how much money people are actually spending there. The volunteer data helped us to increase the volunteer experience. I mean, this year we did, or in 2015, we did really, really well. But the year before, our survey showed that we had areas for improvement. And then since we also collect data from exhibitors, the chair of our program and logistics committee have specific ideas for changes. So, and then what was the last slide? One of the things that our marketing chair had us do in addition to what the iPad collected, she needed more detailed information about where to advertise, and she thinks that the question on the survey is not sufficient. And one of the reasons for that is we do a lot of our communication using social media, and the question that we have in the iPad survey does not ask for enough email. Just having social media is not enough. We need to know which social media. And I think that was pretty much it, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes, it was. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, next we have Wisconsin. Laura, can you hear me?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. All right. Well, I need to apologize up front. My slides are nowhere near as beautiful as what others have been showing. I just threw this together. I'm really sorry. We had our evaluator left our organization, and we were scrambling to pull the slides together. But a little bit about our festival very quickly. This was the one that we held was our 5th festival. We have become a statewide festival, and we were able to use the survey in 2 locations this year. We have been surveying in previous years because one of our funders for a couple years required us to provide zip code information, and so we just got in the habit of gathering surveys. We had always used paper before. Yeah?
Sorry about that. Yeah, there it goes.
Okay,
sorry,
great. So we'd always used paper before, but this was our first year with the iPads. I'll just go through the slides and then hopefully make all the right points. If you could give me the next slide. We found, because we've been doing surveying, we have learned over the years that volunteers don't necessarily get through all the questions or diligently approach enough surveyors. They're just, there's just something about being a volunteer, and we do, like St. Petersburg, we're very volunteer driven. We have a comparable number of volunteers. I didn't mention our festival has about, this year we had 37,000 people statewide. In the main expo that we did most of our surveying, and we had over 4 days, our festival's 4 days in the fall, we had about 10,000 people. And then our secondary site is very, very small, in a small town in northern Wisconsin, was just one event, and I think they had about 200 people. Yeah, if you could go back to the first slide. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. My slides are advancing. Emma, can you, sorry, okay, so I won't talk about
sorry about that.
Okay, so so we paid them, I think $10 an hour, and that helped us get reliable people, and they stayed the whole time. So we just paid them out of our festival budget, and we were glad we did. And then the data point stickers, that really helped the surveyors keep track of folks because we had a pretty good ratio of surveyors to population, and so it helped us just keep getting new people and not have people get annoyed that they were being asked again. So that was really helpful. Okay, next slide, please. Probably our biggest challenge that everybody ran into is that we stationed people sort of near the doors just because of where our expo was. And so we'd capture people before they had a chance to, and we wouldn't figure out until we were halfway through the survey that they actually hadn't experienced enough to provide substantive information about their experience. I think the slides are auto-advancing again. I hope we can have a suggestion of where we have some mechanism to ask them, have you had a chance to check out the expo yet? Or how many stations have you gone to? Or somehow not find ourselves halfway through and then get that information. So that happened a handful of times, and we'd have to abort that respondent until they'd had a chance to go survey and not give them the sticker. So that was one issue. And I can't tell what's going on with my slides. Don't know what's happening. So okay.
Sorry, Laura. I don't know what that's happening.
Okay, so that was probably our biggest challenge. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, hopefully it won't skip forward again. I'm trying to make it stop.
Cool. So the coolest thing we learned, we did a companion survey. So we are working with an evaluation student group, or a faculty member who has students that wanted to do evaluation. And so we had also our own iPads, so that we had 2 cohorts of surveyors, and we had people with other iPads asking questions that were the same questions that had been asked of a statewide population about their interest in science, their trust of scientists, and their demographics. And that allowed us to compare the Science Festival audience from EvalFest to this statewide database. And so that gave us a lot of great comparison information. So I wouldn't say it was internal to the EvalFest survey, but we used the excuse of having EvalFest going on to collect some parallel data that I think will want to cause us to want to ask different questions next year as part of our EvalFest, so we just do one survey. We also were happy to learn that people love our festival, and that one thing I didn't add on here is that about half of the attendees hadn't been to our building or the other survey site, and we were pleasantly surprised. I think both sites were pleasantly surprised by that, and that our audience was a little bit more, and partly that was part of our broader audience. We thought maybe we'd just get people who come to our events throughout the year, and we were very happy that a lot of first-timers to this kind of science event were part of our festival. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
We'll try to go fast. So we're going to use them, as we have been all along for previous years, to help us get smarter about marketing. We have been asking the same marketing question that was in EvalFest we've been asking in previous surveys. And just to help us continue to diversify and target our communications is probably the primary thing. Like some of the other people who have spoken this hour, we're interested in trying to find ways of surveying some other events besides the expo. We're pretty familiar with the quality of the experience, and I think we have an interest in learning more about audiences that come to other festival events. Next slide, please.
And you don't need to rush. I believe you're the last festival.
Okay, all right. So I would say the thing that is really nagging at us, and we've been talking about this with our collaborators, our faculty and student group, is trying to understand what's going on, the motivations of people both who come to our festival, and so we've been doing some parallel work with focus groups and surveys to try and understand, and we did some focus groups at our festival in parallel to EvalFest to understand people's motivations. Like, are they coming because they want their kids to see science and get excited about it in school? Are they coming because they're curious and this seems like fun? Are they coming because it's a free family activity? So we want to learn more about their motivations. And as part of that, we'd also like to go to some companion events that aren't part of the festival, and understand what people's motivations are for coming to those, and maybe are there barriers, or are they just unaware of the festival? So it's a little bit of a twist on your question. It wouldn't be part of the same EvalFest surveying at the festival, but we'd like to learn sort of who isn't at our festival. So I don't know if there's another way of getting at that during EvalFest. Like, do you talk to people who didn't want to come, or, you know, I don't know, but trying to understand people who, motivations of people who come, so getting at like what made you want to come, and then also why people aren't coming, and if there's a way to build that into our EvalFest process, that would be really cool and really informative. In terms of some of the other things that people spoke about during this hour about wanting to better understand, we'd love that too, and getting into the nitty-gritty of what goes on at the stations, and And again, like I mentioned, at other events besides the expo, we'd love to understand that. Some of the more high-resolution information about marketing, of course, that would be valuable. In my own experience, because I did a bunch of the surveying as well, I find that people really didn't quite remember very often. So they'll answer that question about how they heard about it, but just, sort of watching them try and figure it out, they really struggled to remember. Sometimes they knew, like, I came last year, or my neighbor told me, or my neighbor works here, but beyond that, I think people were kind of grasping. They didn't remember. So I don't know how much a higher resolution question would really have high fidelity, but that's just my own thought. I think is that it? Are there another slides?
I believe that is it. Thank you, Laura.
Sure.
Okay, so we still have, oh, go ahead, Emma.
I don't think we have slides from you, Larry, but would you like to present on your festival, or can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I think we may be done.
Okay, well, we still have some time for questions then. And cool. I have a couple questions, and then Emma, should we have people raise their hand, or how do you want to do it in terms of unmuting people?
Yes, please raise your hand if you have a question, and I will unmute you.
Okay, so I'll start while people are raising their hands. One question I had for the St. Petersburg Festival, you shared that the coolest thing was hearing directly from children, and I was just curious, did you actually interview, like speak with children, or was that solely from the survey data? So maybe Emma, can you unmute?
Well, I was with some of the evaluators just to make sure that they got a good start. So the kids don't just fill out the survey, they talk while they're doing that. So I picked up a lot of stuff. Do I think, and this is where your question leads me, that we may have some open-ended questions where they get to explain their own words? Maybe, but then what the kids really enjoyed is playing with the iPad, so I don't know how you get those little kids who can't spell good to, or do we have a voice part that we can do with the
iPads can audio record, yes.
So maybe that is something that we should consider, because some of the kids were just bubbling. I mean, they were just so excited, and they were just talking, you know how kids that age.
I know that that's something that we have done, and not even in the past. We did this just this past festival for the North Carolina Science Festival for children who were a little too young to fill out the survey, but we still wanted feedback from. So that's definitely something we can work with you about.
Great.
Yeah, because that was really, really great.
Cool. Thank you. Are there other questions?
I don't see any hands. Oh, Karen does. Hi, Karen.
Okay, hi. I have a question, and this question about how did you hear about our festival? Is there any way that we can put more detail in that? Because this year they made me collect paper pencil data just for a more detailed question of that.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
You mean more detail in
the answer choices? In the answer choices.
Yeah, you can specify that.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
thanks.
we'll be working with you. Yeah, we will work with you before probably this summer to help get that all prepped as we finish up our spring.
And since we were not the only festival that, and I think I did call you guys or I emailed you about how do you want us to handle the data entry at the end of the survey, the demographic stuff, if we have somebody who is in that between group, between 10 and adult. Have you come up with a solution to that, or are you still debating that?
how to survey the 10 to 17 years old or 11 to 17 years old?
Yeah, the biggest problem we had was the question about how much money are you planning to spend or have you spent. And our evaluators had huge problems because some of the people, well, $5, my pocket money, and then others basically said, well, the whole group spent. So that data, the way that we collected it and what it reflects, while still useful, is just a different basis, you know.
Right. Well, each individual festival chooses which questions they ask, if any, of youth. So, for example, our festival, the Bay Area Science Festival, hasn't been asking questions of youth, and so. But if you want to do that, we can just use the surveys can be designed so that once you get their age, they only get certain questions. You can use logic within the surveys so that if someone is age 10 to 17, you're not asking them how much they spent, or if you are, you know that it's a child answering instead of an adult.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I had a question for the Wisconsin Science Festival. I just wanted to hear more. I thought it was really intriguing that in addition to the EvalFest attendee survey, you had some survey questions that compared to statewide data. I'd love just to hear a little bit more because you said that you saw some differences and trends from people who attended your festival versus the state as a whole. Can you just say a little bit more about what you saw?
I can. I don't have all those data in front of me, but I'd be happy to follow up offline. Is this Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they had done a survey statewide around, I think it was a year before, around there was an issue in popular press in Wisconsin. It had to do with the pink slime stuffing. That was a national issue, right, in the school lunches. And so they surveyed across the state, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but I can follow up, and asked people, their education levels, various demographic questions, as well as how much trust they had in scientists, how much trust they had in corporations, that kind of thing. And so they called a subset of the whole statewide survey and then asked the Science Festival audience at the expo those same questions. So some of the differences were probably what you'd expect, slightly more educated audience coming to the festival, slightly more trust in, I think actually, and again, it's not in front of me, demonstrably more trust in scientists and demonstrably less trust in corporations. And I'd be happy to follow up and actually connect you with them if they're interested. Actually, we have one of their students is actually doing his master's thesis on the 2015 Wisconsin Science Festival, and he presented to our steering committee some of these demographic data. So I think going forward, we're interested in continuing to build on some of those gaps, and especially as we introduce surveys to some of our other festival sites around the state, we think that'll be interesting.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed hearing about challenges, successes, further opportunities. I think there's a lot here that's useful to the group as a whole, and look forward to building on this in June and beyond.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I'd be happy to help out.
Great. Thanks again.
Have a good one.